I will not ever be playing Hogwarts Legacy. I got my refund for it back. I didn't even spend a single minute in this game. And I used to love Harry Potter. Join with me and let us have a true Hogwarts Legacy where we don't support bigots.
I don't give a Keisha.
I have never been a fan of Harry Potter. I spent my childhood obsessed with obscure vampire novels instead, and as a result missed the opportunity to read and become attached to the franchise in a way that would allow me to fondly remember it later. Much of why adults continue to like the series so much is because of the nostalgia associated with the franchise, and the connection it holds to their own childhoods. But what I do care about is consistency. While I hold no stake in the franchise itself, I am concerned about how continuing to like the franchise in the face of the controversy over her feminist statements is being presented as a way to judge one's character. The common leftist argument against supporting J.K. Rowling's work is that doing so actively participates in transgenocide, transphobia, and bigotry, which is a claim that is blatantly untrue. The selective forgiveness of male creators who have committed crimes or taken part in abhorrent behavior and yet still have their art consumed without an obligatory acknowledgement of those actions highlights a double standard in the entertainment industry. Quite simply, crimes are allowed to be absolved, but disagreement is met with vitriol and violence. Those who are so against Rowling, to the extent of a hate campaign against Hogwarts Legacy, are the same people who still listen to and consume the work of other figures they deem problematic, and therefore are not internally consistent in how they treat the consumption of media. These arguments come from the same group which does not oppose pornography, which has been well documented as being harmful in the spread of racist and misogynistic stereotypes and behavior, and yet they still argue for the importance of representation in media. This is a blatant contradiction under their own belief system. Either pornography and erotica, which romanticizes abuse and racism, impacts the world as much as the Wizard Fantasy franchise does, and therefore your partaking in it is morally reprehensible, or neither has a measurable impact and you're making a mountain out of a molehill. Of course, there is a difference between the two, in that pornography has been well researched in its negative impact on those who participate and watch, while a children's fantasy novel has a limited impact, especially given that much of the criticism against it was construed in response to J.K. Rowling's feminist activism. A related question arises. How should we approach media made by people we disagree with? Death of the Author is a framework for literary criticism that suggests authorial intent should be disregarded when interpreting a work because it is the response of the reader that determines meaning. This allows for the consumption of the works of artists like Andy Warhol, who abused several of his muses, Chris Brown, whose brutal abuse of Rihanna is well documented, as well as John Lennon or Elvis Presley, both of which were abusive to their partners, without being viewed as an implicit supporter of their actions. For many people, detailed knowledge of the personal life or actions of superstars is uncommon. Famous people are often viewed as a construct because they are often presented to the public in a carefully curated way that highlights certain aspects of their lives or personalities while downplaying or hiding other aspects. For example, celebrities may work with publicists, agents, and other professionals to craft an image that is attractive to fans and the media. This image may emphasize their talent, success, and wealth while hiding their flaws, personal struggles, or negative behavior. Additionally, fans often project their own desires and fantasies onto celebrities, further distancing them from their humanity. Celebrities become objects of fascination, rather than real people with complex inner lives and struggles. This dehumanization can lead to fans and the media being more likely to overlook or excuse negative behavior, such as abuse or criminal actions, because they are so invested in the constructed image of the celebrity. Although often not presented or suggested in this manner, most are aware of how famous people are larger than life and therefore held to different standards than those in our personal lives. The question of how we should approach media made by people we disagree with, as answered by those who ascribe to gender ideology, is with vitriol and bullying. One of the largest campaigns of this type I've ever witnessed was against the video game Hogwarts Legacy, due to the dubious claims that buying the game would result in J.K. Rowling physically causing harm to trans people. These claims often imply that simply liking the Harry Potter series, which was written far before the rise of transgender identification and gender ideology, is the same thing as hating trans people. Often, detractors seek to retroactively find transphobic thought where there is none, and imply that JKR held and secretly implanted those beliefs into Harry Potter, despite concerns about transgenderism being a primary lesbian concern into the 21st century. As a result, these flimsy claims are often bolstered by claims of anti-Semitism or racism. This falls under a well-documented theme of trans rights activists only seeing the importance of representation when it supports their arguments about oppressed groups, and the tendency to look down upon and patronize minorities who resist being used as a token to validate trans rights activism. For example, one post reads, I got an Anon, which I immediately deleted because initially I thought I didn't deserve any attention. But now that I think about it, there are probably people who could use this knowledge so they don't have to worry about Anons like that themselves. You see, some snarky disembodied voice wanted to make me feel bad for denouncing Anti-Semitism Simulator 2023, better known as Hogwarts Legacy, in the usual what's next, telling people they can't enjoy Lord of the Rings, all fantasy is racist actually way. The biggest mistake here is bringing J.R.R. Tolkien into this, because when Tolkien initially shoved anti-Semitic stereotypes into his dwarves, he didn't do it out of malice. He did it because he was an old Gentile British man, and when someone confronted him about the harm that those stereotypes caused, he wasn't beneath admitting that he may have caused harm and did everything in his power to fix it, mainly by writing Gimli as a compassionate and honorable person who cares about his friends more than about treasures, etc. Yes, there are many issues with Tolkien, and people of color and Jews have talked about them way more competently than I ever can, but the important thing in this conversation is that Tolkien's prejudice was a matter of insensitivity, not malice. Hogwarts Legacy is a game written by neo-Nazis and people who don't want to call themselves that, but sympathize with them anyway, basically making them the same thing. Hogwarts Legacy literally uses genocidal World War II time propaganda tropes. This isn't, I accidentally stereotyped this overall positive character. The whole damn game's premise is ethnic cleansing. The two are not comparable. Don't listen to smug Nazi apologists and listen to Jewish people. Somehow, it is fine to ignore supposed anti-Semitic stereotypes from Tolkien's work, because he was just a poor old man who didn't know any better, but because one of the game devs for Hogwarts Legacy is conservative, and it takes place in Hogwarts, anti-Semitism is inextricable from the game itself. This stems from the accusatory, victimized behavior of this group, wherein callouts and constant scrutiny is par for the course to ensure that no one goes against the grain. However, as per usual, men tend to be viewed in a more forgiving manner with far more leniency than women. Hostile attribution bias is mostly directed at women. This refers to the tendency to interpret others' behavior as having hostile intent, even when the behavior is ambiguous or benign. It is interesting that actual anti-Semitic behavior, such as with Kanye West, has yet to face any similar levels of pushback. The same can be said of Roald Dahl, who was an actual anti-Semite with work still being produced today without any mention of his personal beliefs. Coco Chanel actually collaborated with Nazis, so where is the boycott of Chanel products? It seems that the larger concern is of perceived transphobia rather than of actual harm against minorities, as only so-called transphobes receive this sort of cultural response. It's important to note that many of these claims are baseless. Upon a closer examination of the game's plot points, it becomes clear that these accusations are largely unfounded and are being used as a means of justifying the backlash against the Harry Potter franchise. There is no actual anti-Semitism present in the game, and it is crucial to separate legitimate concerns from baseless accusations. Within the game, there are several plot points which have been treated as if representative of anti-Semitic stereotypes. For example, there are claims that a Nazi worked on the game. This refers to Troy Levitt, who left the project 2 years ago and was a head designer whose duties mostly included animating NPCs and designing the castle. He had a YouTube account which expressed pretty mainstream Republican views and some Gamergate sympathies, but so far there is no response of Nazi sympathies or ill intent towards Jews. Another claims that the game centers around crushing a slave rebellion. The goblins are not slaves, and the rebellion never happens. There is a minority faction of goblins with dreams of a violent revolution that will not only free them from wizards, but subjugate all wizards to them, and multiple goblins for not agreeing with them. They are not a social justice movement. They are a totalitarian minority group trying to overthrow one repressive regime in order to create another. The vast majority of goblins do not support Ranrock's rebellion or want him in charge, not because they are okay with being oppressed by wizards, but because they realize that Ranrock isn't going to be any better and maybe even worse, since he's a lot more violent towards dissenters. Others argue that the inclusion of a horn is meant to refer to a Jewish shofar, though the horns look entirely different from one another and a few people recognize a shofar anyway. There is no anti-Semitism in Hogwarts Legacy. Every claim that there is has been a reach to validate the vitriolic and violent response against the Harry Potter franchise out of an undue hatred towards its creator. A statement from the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism says as much, and reads, "The portrayal of the goblins in the Harry Potter series is of a piece of their portrayal in Western literature as a whole. It is the product of centuries of association of Jews with the grotesque and malevolent creatures in folklore, as well as money and finance. The mythological associations have become so ingrained in the Western mind that their provenance no longer registers of creators or consumers. Those who continue to use such representations are often not thinking of Jews at all, but simply of how readers or viewers will imagine goblins to look. which is a testament more to the centuries of Christendom's anti-Semitism than it is to malice by contemporary artists. So it is of J.K. Rowling, who has proven herself over recent years to be a tireless defender of the Jewish community in its fight against anti-Semitism, for which we are immensely grateful. This is referring to Rowling repeatedly condemning anti-Semitism publicly, particularly among supporters of former British Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn. The controversy surrounding J.K. Rowling's views on gender has created an environment in which anything related to her is considered to be playing into a transgender genocide, regardless of its actual content.
Hey there, my loves. This is a quick video for my trans and Jewish followers out there. I am so fucking sorry that you have to see so many videos of people engaging with this stupid Harry Potter Hogwarts Legacy game. I'm so sorry that so many people are letting you down. I'm so sorry that so many people have chosen their nostalgia over your right to exist happily and safely in this world. And I also wanted to tell you this in case nobody else has yet. You are not overreacting, you are not a burden, and you are not asking too much by asking people to not play this game. I am not trans, I am not Jewish, and I loved Harry Potter as a kid. But I will tell you time and time and again that the decision to abandon that entire franchise was easier than deciding what to eat in the morning. Don't let anybody try to convince you otherwise. You all deserve so much better, and I'm gonna do everything in my power to make my spaces safe for you.
The suspicion of anyone who steps out of line has led to harsh treatment of even those who support trans rights activism.
Here is my unhappy trans response to what streamers have been saying about the Harry Potter game. None of the information about the game is new. We've been talking about boycotting this game since long before it came out. And so I'm a little bit surprised at these streamers' surprise that they're suddenly catching flack for playing this game. And I know that some streamers are saying that they're getting hate speech and that they're getting bullied. But these streamers are acting like they've done absolutely nothing to provoke any of this. But my issue is that this has been turned on its head, and it's gone from trans people and Jewish people are being badly affected by this game to, oh, woe is me, the streamer. I'm getting comments going, don't play this game, that I suck. Oh no, oh poor me. And, and poor dev team, the poor devs. When, where has any of this sudden sympathy come for trans and Jewish people who had been talking about these issues for months? And this is exactly the thing. Telling people to not buy a video game is too far for a lot of people. People value this video game over our issues. And that is just the fact. This woman has single-handedly reinvigorated a whole generation of rad femmes and a whole generation of transphobic people to be public with their statements. So what gets me is that these streamers, these people who buy the game, don't want to be put into a box as a transphobe or as an anti-Semite, right? They just want to play the game. They just want to play their game, right? But you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't blatantly ignore what trans and Jewish people have been saying for months, and not quietly, and then get your little game and then expect everybody to just let it go. Because again, it shows you exactly what you value. It shows exactly what you value. And no, seriously, I don't care if a streamer has donated tens of millions of dollars to charity, done all this amazing stuff. You've been following them, you're on their Patreon, they're such a good person, they have a wife and a kid. I don't fucking care. You either side with the woman who wants us dead, or you don't play one video game. It's really as easy as that. And so the consequences of your action is that you don't get to call yourself an ally. You don't get to call yourself a Jewish ally or a trans ally. And that is just the consequence. You cannot play this game and then go, but I love trans people. You're not listening to us. You only have us around for when our opinions agree with you. You don't actually care.
Such as Jamila Jamil, who was recently subject to harassment and bullying after making a simple mistake on social media. Jamila, who despite being a supporter of trans rights activism, was under fire in 2022 for misgendering a woman during a Twitter spat, and suggesting that if pronouns were so important, they'd be listed in one's name, rather than in a bio, which is rarely read during such arguments. That was all it took for her to become the subject of harassment and bullying on account of her so-called transphobia. But even that is a relatively soft reaction. Other women who have spoken out are immediately hit with sexual violence and misogyny, quite simply, an unwarranted hatred of women. One recent example is Bethany Hamilton, a competitive surfer who lost her arm to a shark attack and had both a book and movie about her journey of healing. By speaking out about trans women being included in sports, she has been subject to such sentiments such as, the shark had the right idea, or the shark should have finished the job. Women who support this kind of rhetoric seem not to realize, if there is an acceptable target for misogyny, no woman is safe. It is the same thought process behind the importance of prisoners having rights, as all one would have to do to lose them is to become imprisoned. And yet, while leftists seem to understand this premise, they have yet to recognize their own hypocrisy when it comes to Harry Potter. Another common argument is that buying the game puts money in Rowling's pockets, and while that is true, this is a woman who is only not a billionaire because of the sheer amount of charity she's donated to. JKR has done far more good in the world than the average Twitter user sending death threats to streamers who dare to play the game.
If you play, buying, or pirating the new Hogwarts Legacy game, you are a...
No disrespect here, but what makes someone a bad person is going on an app and labeling a group of people, children included, transphobes because they purchased a video game. That's what makes someone a bad person. What is it you do in your everyday that makes you such a wonderful person? Are you donating money? Are you donating time? Are you fighting for trans lives? Are you on TikTok right now boycotting a video game? Because truthfully, you don't know what we do in our spare time because you know nothing of us, but you are willing to label a group of people solely because they wanted to play a video game. I'm so tired of this generation being under the impression that their viewpoints and their opinions and beliefs are the only ones that matter. They're the only ones that should exist. And anyone who dares to think differently than them is incorrect and are terrible people, because it's not true. And I'm sure your parents and grandparents had or still have very similar viewpoints as J.K. Rowling, but you won't hold them accountable.
The claim that the money she receives is going towards transphobic causes is only true if one believes opening a rape shelter that only serves women is a form of hatred instead of extreme generosity. Overall, the argument about the controversy surrounding Hogwarts Legacy and J.K. Rowling's involvement in the game is pointless since the game's website clearly states that she did not create it, though her team was closely involved in its development. The developers were aware of the backlash against Rowling's views on transgender people and included a trans woman in the game to distance themselves from those viewers and to placate them. However, this move did not prevent a boycott of the game, which lasted for months. But nonetheless, the game's success suggests that most fans do not care about the controversies and just want to enjoy the game. The concept of the death of the author indicates that a reader's interpretation determines a work's meaning, rather than the author's intentions. Therefore, even from the loosest of interpretations, it is possible to enjoy the Harry Potter series without endorsing all of Rowling's beliefs, as analyzing the text and separating it from the author's personal views is a crucial part of literary analysis. Ultimately, Hogwarts Legacy is just a video game based on a popular franchise, and really, it just isn't that deep. This, dear viewers, is where we part. This was suggested by a commenter on a previous video, and I gotta admit, like I said, I don't really know much about Harry Potter. I've had to do a lot of research to write this speech accurately, and I've talked to plenty of friends who've played the game and therefore know more about it than I do, but I've always found it weird that it's somehow an issue to read or watch things from problematic authors, or read things that are just in general saying views you don't agree with, but it's perfectly fine to watch actual violence and actual misogyny in other formats. Like, it's perfectly fine for you to read a rape fantasy, and totally fine for you to read a conversion therapy erotica piece, but it's an issue for you to read Harry Potter in 2023. And not to mention, it just kind of goes into there's a lot of censorship on both sides of the line right now, where with the left you have to speak in a certain newspeak in order to have anyone listen to you or hear you out, and on the right they don't want you to read anything that goes against their traditions. And while I can admit that some of the things that the left's been putting out lately is not something I'd want a child to read, I think both sides are going about it the wrong way with censorship in general. Because, quite honestly, I think that I have a strong enough moral compass to go ahead and read Mein Kampf or Lolita or anything else that displays problematic behavior, and to understand, because I'm an adult with a thinking brain, that those are things that I do not agree with, because I have the ability to critically think and to use literary analysis to determine what the author intends, what message that is, and what I think about it. But as I've said in many videos, I just don't think that critical thought is a common skill anymore. And I certainly don't think that nuance is as understood as it used to be. So if you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, leave them down below. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.